Welcome to part 2 of 4200 editing practice. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of actually editing some stuff. Alright, so hopefully you've watched the session organization video up to this point, so you know why my session looks the way it does. Alright, so first off, before I ever get really started editing something, I take a listen to it. So you're probably going to listen to this a gazillion times. And so I'll only do a little bit, but here we go. Let's go to the...
Oh yeah! Let's edit some numbers today. Let's count Funkula. We're gonna be counting out of order. We're gonna be putting them in order. I said order twice. Yeah, I did.
Okay, so we got a good enough idea. And yes, I already realized that I'm an idiot. So moving on from that, let's talk some Pro Tools editing. First things first, let's talk about what modes we've got. We've got 4 to choose from: Shuffle, Slip, Spot, and Grid. Let's see what each of them does. Click on Shuffle. I can also get there by using my F keys. So F1, F2, F3, and F4. So F1, F2, F3, F4. Alright, so F1 for shuffle. And don't worry about what I'm doing right now. But let's take a look to see how these regions are going to react in shuffle mode. So, if I've got this region, I click it with the grabber tool and I try to move it. Notice that I can't. You see this little yellow line pop up. And notice it's only popping up either at 0, or if I try to move it to another track. Notice I can only move it to the track beneath it. Wonder why? Well, this is a mono track. It's a stereo track. So you can't drag a mono track to a stereo track. Makes sense? Alright, back on this. So as you can see, this yellow line is only showing up whenever there's a region edit or at 0. Shuffle mode only shuffles the region to the previous region boundary, or region edit, however you want to look at it. And watch what it does once I drop it there. So here we go. Bam. So this region has now shuffled from here and moved itself over here. So that region I just clicked and dragged has now been taken out of the track above and been placed in the track beneath it. Notice that this has scooted to the right to make room for it, and this has scooted to the left, or in other words, shuffled to the left and shuffled to the right. Well, that's shuffle mode in a nutshell. Basically, you can only shuffle regions or edits next to edits. So you typically don't do a lot of editing in shuffle mode unless if you're trying to cut a song down to size. Like say I want to cut this chorus out on this guitar part, so I could just highlight the chorus, and I want it to go from verse to verse. Watch what happens when I press delete. Hey! So this region shuffled from the right over to the left. So now my rhythm guitar goes from verse to verse. Alright, but let's get it all back to normal. And if you've got region edits or something, you want to get rid of them, but you don't want to delete them or anything like that, you can go to Edit. That would be alright, Edit. Heal Separation. So Apple H or Command H. Yeah, it was Apple when I learned Mac, so a few apples will slip out every once in a while, but I mean Command. Alright, so I just highlight, Command H, and my regions are healed. Alright, excuse me. Alright, slip mode, let's talk about that. So this, I can slip and slide my regions wherever I want to go. So I can move this up there, move that over here, move this here, move that there, blah 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 blah, so on and so forth. Slip mode is our free-for-all editing mode. This is where you'll be doing 99% of your work. And by the way, you should always be recording in slip mode. So if you're just going to be recording before you do any editing, make sure you're in slip mode, so you're not locked on any grid or accidentally deleting things you shouldn't be. Okay, spot mode. I'm going to give you 2 guesses what it does when I move things around in spot mode. Well, it asks me what spot I want to put that file at. Hence the name spot mode. So this is a Pro Tools mode that you'll use when you're doing maybe some post-production work, spotting some sound effects, or if you need to drop a file just in a certain place in your Pro Tools session, you can type in that place right here. So this shaker track, if I want to, let's put it on bar 10. All right, so bar 10, press tab, and notice that the end point changes and the sync point changes. All right, so I press OK, and sure enough, now my region starts on bar 10. I can tell by my start and end locators that it starts on bar 10 and ends on bar 81. And I need to put my phone on silent. Okay. So, back to work here. Alright, so if I want to put it back at 0 in spot mode, notice it's going to ask me. Since I don't have 0 in bars and beats, I can just go to minutes and seconds, type in 0. Whoops. Make sure we type it in the right place. 0, tab, and there we go. Hooray, whoop-de-doo. One thing that's kind of interesting about spot mode, if you've been recording files with broadcast wave files, those files inherently put the timestamp information in with the audio. So if for any reason your session gets corrupted and you recorded with broadcast wave files, if you just pull the audio files into a new Pro Tools session, it'll have the original timestamp of when that file was recorded, or when the start location is. So you can just press this up arrow, and it will throw it up in the start location and drop it where it originally was. Excuse my speech impediment today. Okay, so I've done that a couple times. Been pretty useful. Alright, last not least, we've got grid mode. I can click on it or just press F4. And notice that I see some bars show up. If I zoom in, command right bracket for zoom in, left bracket, zoom out. I can see these grid markers. If you don't see them, come up here to grid and click this. See how they come and go. Also notice that the grid is set to a quarter note, so that's set to follow the beat. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, and so on. You can change that to any location you want. If you want to look at minutes and seconds and not bars and beats, so there you go. But typically you'll be doing bars and beats, and I'm going to set it to 1 bar. And there you go. You can set it to whatever you like. Alright, zoom back out, command left bracket. Quick note how I'm going left and right so quickly. I'm just using a trackball. If you scroll up and down with the scroll wheel, like if you had just a regular mouse, it goes up and down. No surprise. If you hold shift, it goes left and right. Pretty sweet. Alright. Okay. We've got another grid mode right here, but we'll talk about that in just a second. Let's go back into slip mode. Alright, there we go. So just visually looking at the song, we've got a gap here, a gap here. Well, I've got some guitars in the chorus here, but not here or here. So let's see if we can take a listen to see if something's lacking. So I'm just going to mute the vocals right now because I don't want to pay attention to them. Alright, so here we go. Well, that certainly doesn't sound right. So I must have had some kind of exporting error when I was exporting my bass and drums. Man, I must have accidentally deleted them. Wish there was a way I could fix it. Alright, well, let's talk about that. Well, before we can get into fixing it, though, we got to know what tools we have available to use to fix it. So we've got the zoom tool, and just like our F keys over here, F1, 2, 3, 4, F5, F6, F7, F8, and if I click here all three of these highlights, and if I smash F7, F8, or F6 and F8 or F7 or any combination of those two, it turns on all three of these. This is called the Smart tool. But basically, here's what each of them does. This is a zoom tool, so notice that I've got a plus sign with a little magnifying glass. Every time I click, it zooms in. If I want to highlight a certain range, I can just click and drag, and notice that it constantly zooms in. Man, I wish I knew how to zoom out. Well, in Pro Tools, if you want to do the opposite of any given command or shortcut, there's a good chance that the option to do the opposite of that control is to press the Option key and then press the control. So if I hold Option, click, notice that my magnifying glass is going from plus to minus. Cool. So minus, there we go. Hooray. And that's just by holding Option. Okay. F6, we've got our cropper tool, so if you need to make a region shorter or longer, notice that when I click, it's cropping it to where I'm pressing with the cropper tool. We've got a couple of these to choose from. TCE stands for Time Compression Expansion. Scrub tool, so if you want to scrub along while you're editing, it's fairly useful when you're trying to find like a pop or something. And we've also got the loop tool. I tend not to use the loop tool very often though. Time compression expansion real quick is just if you need to make I need to make this little note longer, so I need to expand it, if you will. So if I turn on F6 for that expander, when I move to the right, notice that the waveform just got bigger. So it's been expanding the audio so it makes it last longer. So here's my little shaker. Not much. Notice it creates some artifacts, but it expanded the time and amount it took to hear that sound. Okay. Selector tool is F7. This is just to make any selections. This is just like the icon in Microsoft Word. So if you were going to highlight a sentence in Microsoft Word, this region would be my sentence, and the selector tool is how I highlight it. Grabber tool grabs the region. So we've got three different types. Time means it's just moving it along the time. Separation means that if I have turned the Smart tool on, so if I make the selection and move this, it separates that region and grabs it and drops it wherever I put it. And the other one is the object. So if I've got multiple objects like that region, this region, this region, and this region, if I want to select multiple ones, so if I go here, command click, or so let's see, shift, whatever, let's do it this way. There and there. So now it's moving both of those objects. See how they're both moved as one object? Notice it didn't take my selection, so it's only going to take the objects. Or not right there. I guess I selected too much. See how it just grabbed those two objects? That's how it works. Alright. Cool. And those are our tools. Smart tool basically means that the mouse will change depending on where you've got the cursor selected. Top half of the track is the selector tool, bottom half is the grabber tool. If you go to the end, it turns into the cropper. Top right end, fade out. Top left end, fade in. Say you've got a region edit and you want to do a crossfade. So fade, you can fade in, fade out, or you can crossfade between the two. And there you go. All right, so now let's edit this track since we've talked about our tools. And let's focus on these drums first. So I'm going to make this track a little bit bigger, so I can go over here and drag this down, or I can right click, make it jumbo, or I can press Control, up or down arrow. Notice if I do Control Option, it does all tracks. Cool. So Control up, there's our track, Command right bracket zooms in. All right, so let's listen to this little drum pad. Okay, so sounds like it might be the same pattern, just a loop here. But let's see what's going on. I'm going to listen right. And sure enough, it's the same rhythm. So let's practice some looping. All right, so I'm going to do this in slip mode, and I'm going to do this the hard way first, and then we'll go over the easier ways of doing this. Okay, so as I'm playing along, I am going to make use of the up and down arrows on the keyboard. I like to think of Pro Tools as like an instrument or a tool that I can play, so I like to treat it with a musical approach. So I'm going to tap the down beat to find where this loop starts. So, because since this half is the same as this half, I am just going to loop this from here to there. Alright, but I want to do it in slip mode. So I'm just going to give me a little heads up. Command right bracket zooms in. Shift scroll over. And down. Alright, notice I was a little bit late. But the cursor moved to where I pressed down. So if I notice what happens when I press up. So if I press okay, so I've got a little bit of latency with my headphones here, so that's why I'm kind of so off rhythm. But you can see it's selected from when I press the down arrow to the up arrow. So let's see if this loop is right. So to audition my loop, I'm just going to solo my drums just by pressing this solo, and I'm going to make sure loop playback is on. I can right click and turn that on or off. Loop, options, loop playback, or Command Shift L. So Command Shift L, and there we go. So let's audition our loop and see if it's see if our edit points are good. Oh wait, we haven't made any edit points, so let's make some edit points. One way we can do this is by pressing Command E. So edit splice, or what do they call it? Man, it's been forever since I've actually used these. So anyways, moving on. I just use shortcut Command E, and that is one way of doing it. So there's my 2 region edits. All right, real quick. There's also this mode called keyboard focus that I like to start early on so you can build some good habits. And it's this little A to Z. So I'm going to turn this on so it's highlighted. And just for your reference, we've got 3 of these. One there, one here, and one here. So only one of them can be on at a time. So I'll just do this one. And it changes basically how the keyboard's going to operate and the shortcuts or commands to do the tools you need to do the tasks you need to do. Like for example, if I want to copy, typically I'm just going to press Command C and then Command V to paste. In keyboard focus, most of the time it's just going to take away the modifier, so the Control, Option, or Command. So instead of Command C, I just press C and V. Alright, and to make a region edit in keyboard focus mode, instead of edits, we'll think of these as region boundaries. This is saying when this region ends, or when this region ends and when this region starts. So they're region boundaries. Okay, so B. So if I want to make a little edit slice out of this, B. And there we go. Say Command H for heal. If I want to get rid of those regions that I just made, I can go to Edit, Heal Separation, or Command H. So Command H. Alright, so real quick, just to show you this again. Whoops. To do Command H. Up. Okay, and press B, And there are my region boundaries. Let's see how off I was. Wow, super early. So that's not going to work. So if I try to audition this to loop, yeah, well that doesn't sound very seamless. So let's see if we can make that a little bit tighter. So command right bracket to zoom in. And that downbeat, notice it's kind of at the downbeat of bar 31. Is probably where I want to go. So I can click right here. Well, that only works when I'm like zoomed in. If I try to do it from zoomed out, no, smart tool goes crazy. So I press F7. All right, try to get right on that transient. Oh, I was a little late, or a little early rather. All right, so there's an easier way to kind of tab to this transient, and it's tab to transient mode. So if I take my mouse and hover over this, tab to transients. Hence the little tab icon with the wave icon. Turn that on. Now when I press the tab key, it tabs to that transient. So I can press B, put my region boundary, highlight that, Command H, and let's see if our loop's any better. If I want to fit this to my window, remember my shortcut, Option Fit, Option F. Nope, that ain't gonna work. Alright, so let's check my ending boundary. So I just click over here with the selector, Command right bracket, zoom in, and I scroll over to see it. Ooh, super late on that one. Probably wanna see there. So I can click there, or I can use my tab to transients. But while we're at it, an easy way to navigate, since we've got keyboard focus mode on. Remember those old PC games, you know, where you'd hold W to go forward, A to go left, D to go right, and S to go down or backwards? Well, if you use your right hand, P goes up, semicolon goes down, quote tabs to the right, L tabs to the left. So I can just press quote, B, shift click, Command H, and that heals that little region. And let's double click on that, Option F, check our loop. Alright, sounds pretty seamless. Alright, so let's see if we can loop it. Command left bracket to zoom out. One thing we could do is we can duplicate this track. So edit, or duplicate this region, correction. So I can go to edit duplicate, or Command D. So Command D. Sure enough, there we go. Let's see what happens. Alright, so that works. Command D, duplicate it again. Let's listen. Alright, well that sounded a little awkward, but let's see what happens. Unsolo this and listen in context. Alright, well that drum pattern didn't really sound very right, so let's see if there's something else we can do. So I'm going to delete what I just did. Double click delete. And by the way, if you want another way to repeat this, say if you've got to repeat it like, 10 times and you don't want to press Command D, 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 Command, or however many times it's going to take, you can repeat. So you can go Edit, Repeats, or Option R. So I'm going to hit Option R. How many repeats? I'll do 2. There you go. But I feel like something's wrong right here, so I'm going to delete this little section. And I'm going to jump to my first chorus. So I'm going to zoom out and click on this to go to chorus 1. And I'm going to listen to the second half of it. Oh, so I've got a little fill. So I don't have a fill in this loop, so looping this will not work. So I'm going to have to take this fill from here and put it over here. Okay, so we're good with slip mode. Let's see what's happening in grid mode. Actually, let's do this real quick. I'm try my down arrow, up arrow technique. Down. Okay, so I'm just gonna press B, put my little region edit there. Okay, I'm going to highlight that, press C. Down. Alright, press V, see if that pays. Alright, close, but not no cigar. Hold on, gotta answer my phone, hold on. Talk. There we go. Okay, so that's kind of close, but that's kind of an inaccurate way of doing it. So let's see if there's a better way. See if I can put it on grid mode. And let's see if I can drag this over here. So I'm going to set this to bar. And if I want to copy this region and click and drag it, if I want the option to do so, if I hold option, click and drag, looky there, it's right there. Copied it and dropped it right where I wanted to. Well, that's chaos. So Command Z, that didn't work. So why didn't that work? We're in grid mode. It's on the grid. Well, let's see why. Oh, notice my my kick drum's actually hitting here on the downbeats of this bar, but my edit is just a little bit behind. Notice what happens when I try to click and move this region. Whoop! Notice that I can only move it based on the region edit location, and notice it snaps it to that downbeat of the bar. If I had it on quarter notes, notice that it only snaps to quarter notes, and it's doing that by where the edit is. So make this a little easier to see. Okay, so say if I have an edit right here, and I want to move this transient so it's on the downbeat. Alright, so let's move it over in the grid. Well, uh-oh. So it just moved our transient off that downbeat. And notice that all my transients are no longer on the grid. They are this far away. That's because in absolute grid mode, it only moves by the absolute position of the region, not the waveform. Okay, so if I want to do this in absolute grid mode, I have to set my region points. So I'm just going to highlight Command H on the actual grid position. So I can go to verse 2, press B, and see, looks like about that far, so maybe about there. Press B, option, click, and drag. So I want it to start right where that's, or end right where that solo ends. Let's see. All right, so I have some chaos happening in there, but you can see I'm kind of at least on beat. So let's see what this. Alright, so that sounds a lot better. Okay, so there we go. But notice I had to have my region points directly on the grid. So I had to edit on the grid and move my regions on the grid. Alright, so here's where we can talk about relative grid mode. So we can click here and go to relative, or just press F4. So now we're in relative grid mode. And I'm going to delete this. And I'm going to heal this. So even if I'm in slip mode, I'm just going to, let's just highlight from here from there. All right, put my edits. Okay, notice that if I'm in relative grid mode now. So look, I'm going to put my grid on 8th notes. So I am paying attention to where this waveform is on this little 8th note grid marker. And notice where my region edit is. Notice it's not on the marker. Notice if I click and move over an 8th note, my waveform is still on the grid. And my region edit is still the same relative distance. Sorry, I can't talk. Relative distance from our grid location. So the waveform stays with the grid. So it's a much easier way to edit. So I can just put my grid back on bar, option, click and drag, and there we go. Let's see what we got. Alright, and when I'm all said and done, since the drums seem to be working now, well, we've got another gap over there, but I'll let you work on that. I'm going to hit Command H, heal what I don't need, and Command F to do a batch fade. So I like to do this weird wonky fade, so it's linear out, exponential in with no linking. I find that that sounds pretty clean, pretty smooth, and unnoticeable. Sometimes you got to tweak it, but I'm going to keep it fairly short, 8 milliseconds. I'm going to make sure create new fade-ins and fade-outs is checked, and new fades are checked. Adjust existing fades, definitely a big no for me, because if I've already put some fades there, I want to keep them, so I don't want to mess with them. So I press OK, and there we go. Alright, so be sure to check out part 3 to see where we're going to next. So we'll work on the rest of the tracks in part 3. Alright, thanks for checking out part 2. Alright, see you in part 3.